with that, it seems right to talk about the transfer situation as well. I mean, various links, but probably the biggest story in wider football, the Premier League especially, I know you'll have clocked this, there's almost going to be 2 transfer windows this summer all around the Club World Cup. So literally that season finishes on, I think it's the 26th of May, isn't it? Crystal Palace, the final home game of the season. And the first transfer window opens literally on the 1st of June, 5 days later. Then it closes again, and then it reopens after 6 days. It's the strangest break ever. But do you think, not just for Liverpool, but maybe for other clubs, does that change the way business might happen? As in, normally there's a bit of a gap before the end of the season, but you can literally be selling and buying players 5 days after the season finishes.
Yeah, it's I can't really get my head around the reasons why. I know obviously it's linked to the Club World Cup, but I just can't quite sort of understand what this is all about really, and why it desperately needed to be done or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a strange one. Again, it's one of those where, like any change, like the change to the Champions League format, for example, when they come in, you don't know how it's going to affect things until it actually happens and you see it. And, maybe you will see some really early sales or some really early purchases for Liverpool just to get the business done. It's a really, I guess if you're one of those clubs like Liverpool that tends to really nail down who they want and do a lot of legwork before you make your moves, maybe you could see some really early moves in that window that when it first opens up. It's unusual, and we kind of don't, like I say, we don't know the effects that's going to have on the market, who are going to be the early movers and who aren't going to touch that first window until it kind of happens and it comes around. But it just adds another kind of layer of intrigue to the transfer market, which obviously is interesting enough anyway.
Yeah, and the names are interesting enough at the moment. I mean, there's a couple of names that are being linked regularly, and one's existing. We've talked about Alexander Isak a million times so far, but Ryan Taylor of the Mirror and a few others have mentioned this name now as well. French youngster, 22, at Frankfurt, doing very well this season, Hugo Ekitike. And there's a lot of traffic, a lot of interest for this player on social media. Fabrizio Romano even saying he suspects he will end up in the Premier League. There is a large portion of our fan base, it seems, online have got an interest in this player. Have you heard anything on him at all?
Well, the thing is with these is kind of it's still a little bit early to know exactly. He's 100% a target for Liverpool, or they still do. We're probably in the point now where it does start to get a little bit more concrete and decisive in terms of who they're targeting. But I can't vouch for saying that I know everything about that at the moment. But one thing I could say is, look, you've got someone who's 22 years old, is banging in goals at that rate in a top 5 European league. Liverpool will be watching him on a regular basis. There's absolutely no question. So when anyone writes at this point that Liverpool are interested, I wouldn't doubt that for a second. Obviously, the big question then is, did he do anything about it? Did he really kind of, is he the one that they want to replace Darwin Núñez? And we just don't know that at the moment. But he's an interesting name, isn't he? And he is scoring goals. And you do kind of always slightly worry about players who are coming from scoring a lot of goals in the Bundesliga, because we've seen that before, and they've not been able to quite bring it to the Premier League. So we'll see in terms of that, because it does look like he is going to move to the Premier League, whether it's Liverpool or otherwise. But yeah, he's definitely an interesting name, and one I certainly wouldn't rule out at this point.
It does feel like you say that the market's starting to, it's early days, so it's not fully taken shape, but things are starting to develop. And Ekitike, Isak, Alvarez, there's quite a few names linked before. We've talked about Kuna at the same time as well. And he gave an interview, literally, didn't he, the other day, where he said, I want to move on to the next level. He's one that we've mentioned again. You'd fully suspect he's on Liverpool's radar with that known release clause and the price.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. They'd be daft at that kind of, when he has got a release clause like that. He's got Premier League experience. His rate for scoring goals in the Premier League is very, very good. You'd be mad not to keep an eye on him. But I guess with Cunha, it's just that question mark over character. He's had a couple of bad red cards, hasn't he, this season? Yeah. And you just worry, is he a little bit explosive in terms of that? And you worry about that. But again, definitely one that will be on the radar. And I personally, I think he's fantastic. I think if Liverpool are looking for a Firmino type, I just don't think there's anyone out there who would represent better value for money than him. So, personally, I'd be all for him. But we'll see whether Liverpool's recruitment staff agree with me.
They're definitely looking at someone who can play the 9.5, or in the forward line. There's no doubts about that at all. I suppose the other names that, again, Luis Diaz keeps getting mentioned by a few, that Liverpool are not in any sort of renewal talks. That seems to be completely dead, any chance for a new contract there. So there's a big question mark that just gets bigger and bigger. And also, I know you clocked this the other day, Gyökeres, Arsenal seem favourites. So with Arsenal seeming the favourites or strong interest, as it reported by David Ornstein, do you think that means that if they're moving there, other targets could be available for us, shall we say?
Yeah, but I wouldn't get kind of too excited about Isak, for example. I mean, I know I've put a dampener on this quite frequently, so I apologise to everyone for that. But I just really, really struggle to see it. Just the how much it will cost, what else Liverpool have got to do this summer. The fact Newcastle are in such a strong situation with him, 3 years of contract left. He's won a trophy there now. They're still in contention to get in the Champions League. I mean, if they get in the Champions League, it's game over. He's not going anywhere, let's be honest. If they don't, maybe that opens the door slightly, but still, like I say, the contract situation, won a trophy. Can they just get one more year out of him before they make a load of money on him? So I'm really sceptical that he will move at all, to be honest. But that, maybe Arsenal have got that same feeling, which is why, you're looking at Gyökeres instead of Isak, and they will no doubt be looking at Ekitike as well, because it's not a massive number 9 market. And I would say that all of them as well, Isak aside, probably come with question marks. And even with Isak, you'd say, he has had injuries from time to time, hasn't he? So, there's a few number 9s that are going to move, but it's a very small market, really. And it's going to be interesting to see who ends up where, because, Liverpool are definitely going to be involved, aren't they? Obviously, we've spoken about Arsenal, and, there's several other clubs as well who will be in there as well. I'd say Man United could need to get rid of their 2 centre forwards and get a better one, but we'll see where they're up to. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of competition for very few players and a few question marks over the ones that are available. So I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how that kind of shakes out, who ends up where, and just how well they actually do in the end.
Yeah, all we know for definite is Liverpool will be in for one of them. Which one it is, we're just not 100% certain yet, and we probably won't know for a fair while. But 2 other links, probably not household names, I'd say, but one at Porto, a right back, which naturally, with everything that developed last week, it has come into the focus. Martim, I didn't pronounce that wrong. Martim Fernandez, Portuguese right back, under 21. A lot of people, and we looked at him on transfer market metrics, there's a lot of potential there, but people will shout about the sample size. Heard anything on this one or this name at all?
No, can't say I have, to be honest. Not anything I've heard anything on really with this one. So, maybe some truth in him. Maybe, again, one of those where he's playing for a decent sized club at a good level. So Liverpool will have scouts who've watched him, no question about that. But whether that's turning into anything. But I think what's interesting on this one actually is that, what do they do around right back if Trent leaves, in terms of, are you promoting Bradley, and then is your signing behind him someone who is 19 years of age and can be the backup for a while? Is that kind of how you approach it? Or do you sign someone who's a little bit more ready, who can come in and kind of still keep Bradley as that backup for a little while? That's interesting to me, because I think Bradley's good enough to play for Liverpool, and be a consistent starter for Liverpool, to be honest. Obviously, he can't do the things that Trent does, but no other right back in the world can, so that's absolutely fine. And Liverpool will have to adapt how they approach games. But for me, I would like to see Bradley as the main starter next season at right back if Trent is to leave. So if that's going to be the case, then signing like this I could probably get on board with, because it is someone with potential who can come in, will happily be the backup for a few years and go about it that way, and that would kind of cement Conor Bradley is the first choice there. So it's interesting from that aspect. But like I say, I haven't personally heard this link, so not one I can back up or vouch for at the moment.
Interesting. And Brace DeVille was asking there, any chance Liverpool could go in for Gyökeres? Well, we kind of answered there, Brace, about the striker market. It's just hard to see. We'll have to see what does eventually unfold for there. And I suppose if you have got Conor Bradley for you as number one and has the ability to do number one position at right back, does that mean essentially it makes Frimpong less of a chance of a move for you? Because that's the other one that keeps coming out, doesn't it? The plays right wing back for Leverkusen, Dutch international, well known, would count as homegrown. But he is a starter for a team that's been in the Champions League and won the title. So there's no way, surely, Frimpong's coming to be a backup or even, in his mind, share the minutes with Conor Bradley.
Yeah, I'm a little bit sceptical about this link as well, because I just think he doesn't play right wing back like a right back at all, does he? Yeah. You know, he's more wing than wing back. It's kind of, he's basically playing as a forward. So, you know, to come into Liverpool and be asked to play right back where, you know, you will have some defensive duties, I just think it's such an easy link that people are kind of making. I'd be really, really surprised if there was any truth in terms of him coming in as a Trent Alexander-Arnold replacement. And as I say, you know, I would like, and I feel like Liverpool are going to promote Conor Bradley, and therefore, as you say, the person who comes in at right back would be someone to back him up rather than a guaranteed starter like Frimpong, which he would you know, presumably expect to be.
Yeah, and fingers crossed, Conor Bradley's contract's on the list of things to sort, but we'll come back to him as a player later. And the only other one to mention, this name has come up as well, Mohamed Amoura. So Algerian international, scored a hat-trick, to be fair, during the international break for Algeria. Can play 9, but also on the left wing. Short, but very quick. And a lot of people, when we profiled him, looks very much like, as it was called, an Edward-style signing. Very much one of the data ones that's not heralded. Probably, I'm guessing, because it's not going to be a heralded one. Not really heard much on this one at all.
No, and I think with this, it's kind of one of those where maybe we'd see this come to fruition if you know, if quite a lot happens in terms of outgoings. Obviously, there's so many doubts, isn't there, going into this summer, and we've spoken about quite frequently, really, about the idea that, you know, Luis Diaz, Diogo Jota, pretty well basically every one of the forwards except Cody Gakpo, you can make a case for, might be leaving this summer. So. You know, maybe he's on that list and someone they're looking at in terms of that. But at the moment, you know, it doesn't look to me like someone Liverpool would be making a priority signing, or he wouldn't be the Darwin Núñez replacement, for example. It's maybe someone to bring in and kind of bolster your attack if you lose a couple more. But I mean, again, you know, we're talking about huge turnover, aren't we, at the moment? But we'll see. Yeah. We'll see kind of how that shakes out. But again, it's very early. We're not even at the point where, you know, they can plan for kind of what the summer's going to look like. But also there are things that you can't plan for in terms of, are Barcelona going to come up with enough money for Luis Diaz? Is a Saudi club going to come and he's actually going to want to go? You know, all these things that are very, very hard to predict. The one you can predict is that Darwin Núñez, the money will be there for him and that he will want to go. And, you know, you can pretty much predict that. But everything else that's happening around that forward line is tricky. So, there'll be a few kind of names thrown up as potentials, and maybe this guy will be one of them. But, we're still a little bit far away from that being anything concrete, I'd say.
Yeah, fingers crossed there will be things that break in the near future. But there's still a title to be won in the meantime. And you talked about links and things that might have to happen. I know you'll have plopped the Mel Reddy article about Trent Alexander-Arnold. She talked about him in depth. She gave quotes. And maybe bizarrely, out of everything, the thing that was focused on, I understand this, was if he's departing, it was this line: when a good offer would be accepted for Harvey Elliott this summer. Now, we've talked about Harvey Elliott and his minutes, that possibly not being too happy, understandably, about the whole situation. But it almost felt like the first time a journalist had put it into the mainstream, almost like a club line, so to speak. Yes, we would take a good offer for Harvey Elliott. I think this isn't really a surprise to you, though, this one, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, it's just been clear, hasn't it, in terms of his place in the squad at the moment. He hasn't played a lot of football, and that Liverpool would be open to selling him. I don't think comes as a massive surprise. I mean, it's a shame, because I think, you know, I think they'd be daft to sell him. I think there's huge potential there. I think he can be a great player. I think he already is a very, very good player, and he's young, got a lot of experience already, and he absolutely loves playing for Liverpool. So it's kind of maddening to me, really, that Liverpool can't find a spot for him. And I guess that the interesting thing will be whether kind of something happens in terms of, does he actually get sold, or does he decide he wants to stay and fight? It's going to be an interesting one in terms of how this plays out over the summer. But I feel like he's going to, at the very least, have a decision to make on what he does, and it doesn't look like his prospects are improving, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it seems strange that when we talked a year ago, listen, football moves quickly, but we were saying how well it was going for the youngsters and the homegrown players. But 12 months ago, positive for the academy. Now, 12 months fast forward, question marks around Harvey Elliott, Jarell Quansah being linked with a move away to Newcastle. Even Connor Bradley with a couple of years left to go, people saying, can he be first choice? Issues potentially around his contract as well. Do you think for this summer, homegrown, that word keeps getting mentioned, and people say it's being blown out of proportion, but do you think that's really going to come into the focus in the plan?
Well, that again is kind of why I find it crazy that there's kind of this willingness to maybe consider offers for Harvey Elliott. Homegrown players are expensive, and and when you get ones that come along that want to play for you and are very good, then why are you kind of getting rid of them? I don't really understand it. And similarly with Jarell Quansah, clearly there's the fact that those stories are out there and that there's a bit of a price tag on his head. It makes me think that there's a willingness there to sell as well. But and again, on top of all of that as well, we're already talking about so much turnover this summer. The turnover that you can predict will happen. If you throw in any extras and any little surprise moves, like a Harvey Elliott departure and a Quansah or whatever, it starts to get crazy. I mean, we can't seriously be thinking about coming into this summer that you're going to have 8 out and 8 in or whatever. It's that it seems that's not a good way to kind of go about defending a title, I would say, because I think you'll lose a few weeks or months to kind of gelling this all together and trying to get it to work. So it's just really, really kind of interesting storylines going into the summer. And I think it's one of the most fascinating summers I can remember coming into covering Liverpool, to be honest, for all those reasons, for all the kind of question marks around homegrown players, the who might go, the ones that will go and need replacing. There's going to, I think there is going to be turnover. I don't think that can be avoided, but it's the scale of it and who the kind of surprise departures are. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think, you start losing players like Harvey Elliott, who you would have thought when a year ago you would have said were nailed on to play for Liverpool for the next 10 years. Then it starts to get very, very interesting. It also puts a lot of pressure on the recruitment staff to make a lot of right decisions in terms of incomings and not getting those wrong. So it's going to be interesting. I'll say that much.
Yeah, Rick 13953 saying that was probably Mo Salah knocking on the door saying he signed an extension. We hope that. Adam also saying, which is true, for all the change, all the turnover, it does feel like saying there, what's the last time or when was the last time we signed an extension for a player? There is just so much to do this summer. It is absolutely unreal. We'll see how that all unfolds.